Well, once again, welcome. Thanks so much for being here. Glad you're here. Good to see all your faces. And once again, happy Mother's Day. I think we even have a graphic for that. Happy Mother's Day, just to kind of, make sure we put a stamp of approval on that one. Oh, and Pastor Scott forgot an announcement, so just oblige me for a second. We have prepared, actually Pastor Scott has prepared, a little photo booth in the lobby. So if you'd like to avail yourself of that, just to kind of have a moment to, I don't know what your plans are for the Mother's Day weekend, but if you'd like a little moment to stand with your spouse or your kids and your mother, whatever. The photo booth is there, so take advantage of that after the service. If you don't have one of those fandangled things that take your picture, Natasha Castellano will be out there as well. She'll take your picture and then she can, print a copy or something, text it to somebody, We will, and we'll probably put a couple of these on Instagram or whatever, but it'll be fun. It'll be good. So we're starting a brand new series. We have been through this series called Confronting Christianity, which was a little bit of an apologetic series. It was a series where we took on some of the harder issues or some of the things that we thought were in culture today, questions about Christianity, some of the questions that you might engage with people at work or people in your neighborhood or something like that. And so you can check out all those on YouTube. We didn't want to beleaguer the point, but we wanted to make sure that we brought those questions up because that's our reality. And so check those out there on our YouTube channel. We're changing to a series called The Grace Between Us. The Grace Between Us, which is going to be a series on relationships. On relationships. So how many people know we're supposed to love the Lord our God with all our heart, soul, mind, and strength? And that's so easy. Yes, Pastor, I do my devotions. But then as soon as your neighbor comes along, or your coworker comes along, or your sibling drives you crazy, or your in-laws, or whoever it is, it's like, I cannot keep my salvation in these relationships. Right? Anybody with me? Can I get a witness? Okay. Relationships are hard. Do you know the Bible talks all about relationships and how we should do relationships? And so that's what we're going to do. We're going to talk about the grace between us. Famous movie came out a number of years ago. We're stealing some thunder from them, The Space Between Us, and we're turning it into The Grace Between Us. And so what we're going to do is we're going to attack Ephesians 5. We're going to go through Ephesians 5, which, if you know, is probably one of the most controversial scriptures in all the Bible. And I won't tell it because you guys will never come back until we get into our series on Daniel, which is in June. However, I think we have it up here, Ephesians 5, and I'll just kind of whet your appetite here. This says, and this is all kind of leading into this whole discourse Paul gives on relationships, and I'm telling you all this for a point, by the way, so just stay with me. Be very careful then how you live. That's good motherly advice right there. Be very careful, son. Wear a coat. Don't obey the speed limit, right? All those things that moms say. This is Paul. He's not a mom, but he's talking like a mom. Be very careful then how you live, not as unwise, but as wise, making the most of every opportunity, because the days are evil. Can we get a witness in the house on the days are evil? Okay, so Paul was evil back then. It's probably tenfold now, or maybe 100-fold. Therefore, do not be foolish, but understand what the Lord's will is. Don't get drunk on wine, which leads to debauchery. Instead, be filled with the Spirit, which kind of makes sense. Let's go to the next slide. This is leading into his whole discourse on relationships. And it says, speaking to one another. Everybody say one another. One another. Say, I'm a one another. Everybody in my life is a one another. Okay? So with that being said, speaking to one another with psalms, hymns, and songs from the Spirit, sing and make music from your heart to the Lord, always giving thanks to God the Father for everything. And I even include everyone, which might even be tricky, but in the name of our Lord Jesus Christ. And then this is the kicker phrase for our series. Submit. Submit to one another. Not because they deserve it, not because they're awesome, not because they do everything you say, not because they do it your way. Submit to one another out of reverence for God. So this idea that when God comes into our heart and in our life, it should change us enough that it affects the way we treat people, right? And I don't know about you, but there are lots of broken relationships, and I find in our world today, because we're so rights-focused, a lot of times we don't do relationships well. And so there's a lot of chaos, there's a lot of destruction, there's a lot of trauma involved in relationships because we don't know how to do relationships well. So we're going to do 6 weeks on relationships, and we're going to cover the 4 that are mentioned following here. And we're going to parentheses this entire series by Mother's Day, which is today, and Father's Day, which is in June. So Father's Day, today is going to be a challenge to mothers and challenge to women. If you're a woman in this room, we're really speaking to you today. We want to honor moms, we want to honor women, and we're going to kind of go down that road today. So if you're a woman, this is for you. And then if you're a man, you want to be here on Father's Day, because we're going to challenge you on Father's Day as well. So those will be the two ends of the spectrum, the two genders, and then in between we'll talk about all of the different relationships that come up. Sound like a plan?
Amen.
That's the plan for the next 6 weeks anyways, whether you like it or not. We're not, unless Jesus says, don't do that. I don't know, but he didn't say that, so we're going ahead with it. Okay, so the reality of moms everywhere. And let me just preface this as well. I'm going to try and be brief, because I know you got to get to Argyle Grill, or you got to roast in the oven or something. I'm going to try my best to be brief. I don't know how I'm going to do that, but I'm going to do my best to just honor the fact that you're here today on this special day. Moms, you're superheroes. I just want to come out and say it. And the way I know this is because I had a mom, and she battled her entire life. Battled like you would not believe, with addiction, with depression, with trauma. I mean, on and on and on. And she raised 5 kids, and to this day, I still don't even know how she did it. So I want to stand here today as a product of all the work that she put in, the tireless work. And as I kind of look at that, I know my wife is sitting over here. And I'm like a tenth of what she is in terms of a parent to our kids. If they have a problem, they don't call dad. Well, sometimes they do. If Tori needs to be picked up at the train station, she'll call me. She won't call mom for that. But if there's anything serious, right, mom gets the call. And sometimes this is after a long day at work, and I just am like, just in awe of the wisdom and the fact that there's connection and the fact that there's health. And so, Carolyn, I honor you today. And I kind of did also get ahead of myself, because as we honoring the rest of you superheroes that are mothers in the room, and so that's how I know you're superheroes, because I have my mom and I have my wife, and so I kind of like, these mothers, they're pretty awesome. So we have chocolate. How about that? Yeah. How about that? Right? There you go. All right. Billy loves to clap, even for chocolate. So Pastor Scott and Natasha have chocolate here. And for those of us who are not moms, there's chocolate after service. So for right now, it's chocolate for the moms only, but after service, there will be chocolate for everybody. But so we just want to start out and just say thanks to moms everywhere. You are literally representations of that verse that talks about laying your life down for someone else, right? It's sacrificial love, and you guys do it all the time. And so I have a few things to talk about that are a little bit more uncomfortable as we go forward, because it's difficult being a mom today. And probably going forward, it's going to be even more difficult, because there are challenges that have come up in the last decade that no mother in this room would have ever thought would be on the horizon, but they are not on the horizon, they are here. And so there are some tough days ahead for parents, for fathers, for mothers, for families, for our culture, because there are some waters that have been stirred up here. And so we're going to talk about that. But before we do, God bless the Leafs, eh? I know. God bless the Leafs. And so there was one redeeming quality, or one redeeming factor out of the loss that was just horrific the other night. And I was watching it, and the NHL actually had the audacity to honor mothers. And I just want to show this little video clip, so if we can make sure we got audio up on computer, and then Amber, if you could do the honors. Tears in my eyes. You don't raise the cup without the woman who raised you. And so, moms, we thank you. So as much as there's the reality that moms are heroes, and we get that, and we just got to establish that, number one, number two is there's a reality in our moment, the reality in the moment of our day, in our culture. And yeah, this world is becoming a mess, and it's a mess, and it's becoming even a greater mess. The further we get away from the truth of God's word, the further we get away from the laws of God, the world is just descending into this chaotic and confusing and painful mess. And so this week you may have heard this story about Q Beach Junior Public School. And they had a sign on the front of their school, as a lot of schools do, which is meant to be motivational. And so this sign says, life does not come with a manual, it comes with a mom. And I'm like, oh, isn't that so cute? And do you know that people were so offended by this, they took it to social media, and they called it exclusionary, and they called it, all kinds of different wonderful, weird and wonderful things. The person who was the kind of the beginning of it all said, I don't know if this is a terribly misguided attempt at wishing folks a happy Mother's Day, or just generally the worst sign possible. Wow, I want to hang out with you. She wrote, I don't feel like this represents the neighborhood it's in or the cohort of families at this school or anything really. Another person said that this greeting was in bad taste and others called it inappropriate. Mega exclusionary. Like when people start messing with moms, you know things are bad. Right? Like when moms can't get their due, you know things are terrible. The two things about this grieved me greatly. Number one, they took the sign down. They took it down. Number two, do you know who came up with the sign? The grade 6 class. Right? So as much as I just honor everything you do, our culture is all of a sudden in this position where it doesn't even know what it thinks is good or bad anymore. And so we have this tension with things like this, with the idea of feminism, which has been on the rise for decades, right? Has been on the rise where it's like we've been subjugated by men, and so we have to rise up, and we have to fight back. And so as you'll see as we read through Ephesians, God has covered all of this. God has covered all of this. And in fact, as we go through Ephesians and you go back to that, hey, submit yourself to one another then out of reverence for Christ. There's no feminism in that. But feminism exists in our world as much as all these other things on social media and others. And then we have this little problem that has become a huge problem in the fact that there's a lot of women out there who just aren't women. And I don't know if you've been tracking with this, but the more I kind of pushed into this and the more I dug into it, I was like, this is pervasive and it's becoming a problem across the board. And not really for us. It's becoming a problem in other cultures, in other facets of society. And so we have a person just this last week or last month, Leah Finke, who is here. And this is the Woman of the Year, or at least up for Woman of the Year, 2023. USA Today has a number of women, and she is among them. And here's the thing, is she is not a woman. And if she's fighting for rights and all that, I've got to give her her due. But I'm like, what is going on? And it would be one thing if it ended there. But it doesn't. Rachel Levine in 2021, she was the first openly transgender 4-star officer in any of the United States uniformed services, as well as the first female 4-star admiral of the Commissioned Corps. So this is the first 4-star general. And it's not a woman, even though she's being touted as a woman. She's a man. Michaela J. Rodriguez, actress, is the first transgender woman to win a Golden Globe for Best Female Actress. Leah Thomas, and you probably have heard this ad nauseum. It's all over my social media, everywhere I go. This is the first openly transgender athlete to win NCAA Division National Championship. And what's funny about this person, Leah Thomas, is that she swam for years in the men's division and was like way down the list. And she's like, oh, I got an idea. I'm going to change my gender. And now all of a sudden she won the championship. And in fact, she didn't win. There was this other girl who, God bless her, tied her. And in a moment of insanity, again, the female did not get the award, the transgender person got the award. Basically for fear of backlash, I think. Leads us back to about 8 years ago where I believe all this began, and you'll remember this moment in our history. The 2015 Woman of the Year was Caitlyn Jenner, and she was considered a trans champion. Do you know, if you see her in interviews today, she has walked back all of the vehemence and all those things. She's like, what's happening today is actually not okay. And she only 8 years ago won the award for being what these other people are being celebrated. The further you go into this, you have like Mary Gregory, who is a man who entered women's powerlifting, set all the records. Rachel McKinnon, who's a cyclist, who's demolishing the women's field. You got Dylan Mulvaney, who's an actress. You got Addison Rose Vincent. It's just on and on. We don't know what a woman is anymore, let alone what a mother is. And so we have to talk about the reality. If I stand up here and I say, hey, moms, just go for it, or women, just go for it, but we don't actually lay the ground rules, because the ground rules have changed. The landscape has changed. Then shame on me, because I'm just talking, pie in the sky. Like, we need to talk about reality. And this is the reality of our culture. And we are literally in the days, Pastor Scott, you brought this verse up a couple of weeks ago in your sermon, which I would just encourage everybody to go watch on our YouTube channel, is Isaiah 5:20. And it says, what sorrow for those who say that evil is good and good is evil, that dark is light and light is dark, that bitter is sweet and sweet is bitter. And I'm like, this was a prophecy 700 years ago, and we're living in those days right now. Judges 21:25 is the verse that always comes to my mind in days like this. It says, in those days, Israel had no king, i.e. there was no authority in the land. Israel had no king, and all the people did whatever seemed right in their own eyes. Now, I've done a little bit of history research, and I won't go into all this. Maybe we can talk about it over coffee sometime, but every time history gets to this position, the nation falls. Every time. Greece, Rome, back in Noah's day, back in David's day, every time. Because there's no authority. There's no standard by which we live. Like, how do we even do this? Everybody just does whatever they want. And there's no way you can tell me what I'm doing is not okay. And it has moved into womanhood, motherhood, all of those things. And so, 2 Corinthians talks about this. Ephesians talks about this too. And I think this is also important context for us to remember as Christian people, and as we talk about relationships, is, we're not struggling against flesh and blood here. Those people aren't the enemy, right? There is this insidious attack from Satan, and he is moving in our culture to just pull down. What's his mission, right? To steal, kill, and destroy. Is he doing it? Yeah. Is it time for the church to start pushing back? Yeah. So Ephesians says that, and then Corinthians says this: for though we live in the world, we don't wage war as the world does. The weapons we fight with are not the weapons of the world. On the contrary, they have divine power to demolish strongholds. And I think there's another verse here. It says, we demolish arguments and every pretension that sets itself up against the knowledge of God, and we take captive every thought and make it obedient to Christ. So this is a time where Peter talks about, hey, we need to be sober. Right? These days of Christians being lackadaisical, apathetic, whatever, uncaring, those days have to be gone. We have to be on our toes, like our confronting Christianity, but also in lieu of these issues as well. Because they're coming. This is not going away. This is not getting smaller. It's only getting bigger. And your faith will be tested. And so women, today, my challenge to you is through the story of Esther. How many people have read the story of Esther? If you're a woman today, just go home and read that story, and you'll be just like, yeah! Superhero Esther, right? She's just an example of, living out your purpose for the Lord. And so for those of you who don't know the story of Esther, there was this king named Xerxes, and this was in the Medo-Persian Empire after the Assyrians and the Babylonians and the Medo-Persians came along, and they took over, and they were kind of running things. And so people in the Babylonian times from Israel had been taken in exile, like Daniel and some of those guys, and they were living in this place called Medo-Persia. And there was this king there named Xerxes, and he has a couple other names, but we'll go with Xerxes. And there was another guy named Haman who was his right-hand man. Haman hated the Jews, right? You know this? Haman hated the Jews. And so anyways, this Xerxes guy really didn't do a whole lot. He really didn't do a whole lot. Maybe typical politician, I don't know. But really didn't do a whole lot. He threw a feast for 120 days. All right. Half a year of feasting. We're just going to feast. We're just going to eat. What are we going to do after you? We're going to eat more. We're going to drink. We're going to drink more. If you read the story of Esther, almost every time this guy's mentioned, he's either eating or drinking. So he's maybe got a bit of a problem himself. But anyways. He has this lavish feast right at the beginning of the book. And he calls his queen in. He's like, Queen, come to me because you're so beautiful and I want to show off. Because all the men would party together and the women would party together. And then he called his wife in to because he wanted to just kind of show off how beautiful she was and that this is my wife. And she didn't do it. Okay, here for women's rights. She didn't do it. Good for her. And so all of a sudden he's like, what? You're disobeying my authority? And so all of the guys gather around to, how dare she? Once word gets out on the street that she's disobeyed you, well, all of us. And it's like, well, why did you do this in the first place? Maybe it was because you were drunk. How about that? Maybe you just didn't make a good decision here. Anyways, they didn't take responsibility. They just put out this law that women should be subjugated to men in this culture. And so, anyways, Haman, because now he needed a new wife, Haman gets this idea, and he says, we should run a beauty pageant, and we'll have all the beautiful women from, the area. They'll come, and you can, have all these concubines, and then you can test out and see who's the wife for you. Because we've got to replace this woman who did not come when you called. And so they have this beauty pageant, and Esther is one of the women that's there, and she's chosen, and she comes into the royal palace, and obviously she was beautiful. Obviously she had the favor of the Lord on her. Obviously she had sparkle in her eyes. She was special because she earned the favor of the king. And so the king and her had, this relationship. Whether Esther wanted it or not, that was just the nature of the beast. In the meanwhile, in the other part of the kingdom, Haman had this relationship with a guy named Mordecai, and Mordecai was a bit of a problem for Haman, because Haman also wanted everybody, including the men, to bow down to him. And Mordecai wouldn't do it. And so Haman had this real vendetta against Mordecai, and wanted to kill him. And so he he wants to put an edict out. He draws up a law, brings it to the king, and says, I want all of the Jews in our land to be killed. So prior to that, though, the king, who couldn't sleep, got some of the royal records out, because maybe you do this in yourself, but he got some of his notes, maybe his iPhone notes. He starts scrolling through his iPhone notes. Anyways, he gets a page to come and read him the things, and as he's reading all these notes, he recognizes there was this man, Mordecai, who uncovered a death threat on the king. And he kind of told the king, hey, this is going to happen, and really saved the king's life. So he's like, we need to honor this man, Mordecai. So you got the tension here, right? Haman wants to kill Mordecai, and the king wants to honor Mordecai. And so Haman rushes in with his edict in hand. Hey, we got to do this. And he says, wait. Before you do that, we got to do something else. Okay, whatever you want, king. We have to honor this man named Mordecai. So, right, remember that? He has to lead him through the city, and he gets all the accolades, and there's Haman just like, oh my gosh, this is the guy I want to kill. And he's literally the guy on the horse, and there's a feast going to be in his honor. So anyways, it does finally come around to the fact that the king passes this law that all the Jewish people are going to be slaughtered. They're all going to be killed. And the tension in this moment is the fact that the king does not know that Esther, his newfound love, his favored one, is Jewish. And so all of that's kind of in the background. The edict goes out, and Haman gets a letter in the mail. Hey, by the way, on this day, it's going to be free reign on the Jewish people on XYZ date. Orders of the king by way of Haman. And so Mordecai goes back to Esther and goes, well, now you're in the palace. You can do something about this. And she goes, well, I can't do anything about this because there's no way that I can go before the king. If I go before the king, that's basically, I would be guilty of murder, and they would kill me. Because that was the equivalence. If you didn't have audience with the king, and you asked for audience with the king, you could basically be killed. And so Esther is in a very precarious situation. Her people are in a very precarious situation. And it's like, okay, well, what's going to happen here? All the Jews going to be wiped out? Is Haman, this heinous guy, going to get his way? And the king's like just drinking and eating. He doesn't really even know what's going on. And so you can imagine Esther, she didn't ask for any of this. She didn't ask to be taken away. She didn't ask to be made some guy's wife that she didn't know. She's probably, I would say, early 20s. She's probably like, I got all these plans, I'm going to do this, I'm going to X, Y. All those are gone. Now you're in the palace, now you got to live by the palace rules. I can't imagine what level of frustration is in her heart and mind and what level of tension. And now, on top of it all, she stands to be killed. Along with Mordecai. So here's our key verse, and this is what we're going to go from as we go forward for you ladies. So Esther 4:12, and again, I would encourage you to read the whole story because you'll read it and it'll be better than I just told it. But Esther 4:12, it says, when Esther's words were reported to Mordecai, he sent back this answer. Do not think that because you're in the king's house, you alone of all the Jews will escape. He's reminding her, hey, you're a Jew too. For if you remain silent at this time, release and deliverance for the Jews will arise from another place. I think Mordecai was a man of faith and he thought, well, somehow we're going to get out of this. I don't know how, but somehow. But it seems like you're the best option at this moment. But you and your father's family will perish. And who knows, but that you have come to your royal position for such a time as this. I get chills when I read that. And you probably have a bumper sticker or a fridge magnet or something decorative that says this. You know, you were created for such a time as this. When I think about what we're going through in our culture, right? I think about you in your position as a woman, as a mother, as a grandmother, as a female. You are in a position to affect our culture for such a time as this. Esther was in a very unique position to affect culture. And she didn't ask for it. Nobody trained her for this, right? It's like, why me? Why now? I don't want this. You know, almost like Jesus. But this cup would pass from me. And it's like there's no one else on the inside like you, and you could affect change here. And so then here's her reply. Then Esther sent this reply to Mordecai. Go, gather together all the Jews who are in Susa and fast for me. Do not eat or drink for 3 days, night or day. And I and my attendants will fast as you do. And when this is done, I will go to the king, even though it is against the law. And if I perish, I perish. So in this moment, and we'll talk about this as we break it down going forward, she turns to God. And if you know the story, what God does is God gives her this plan. Hey, you know, this guy loves banquets. Why don't you have a banquet? Hey, king, would you like to come to a banquet? Yes, I would. I love banquets. I had a 6-month banquet one time. They said this about 4 years later. Is there anyone else you want at this banquet? Yes, let's bring Haman. Like, think about the courage of this lady to bring the king, who had the power over her life and death, and Haman, who was a sworn enemy to the Jewish people. She has one banquet, and okay, well, what is it that you wanted as they're at the banquet? What is it that you wanted? Well, I wanted to tell you that I want to have another banquet. Okay, great. So have another banquet. Well, what is it that you wanted? Well, I wanted to let you know that I'm Jewish. I'm Jewish. In front of Haman. And there's a law coming down the pipe that in 3 months' time or 2 months' time or whenever it was, that all of the Jews will be killed, and I just want you to know that I'm one of them and I will be killed on that day. So now what do we do? Well, who came up with this stupid law anyways? Because the king was probably drinking so much he didn't even remember. It was this guy over here who's in the chicken salad. right? I don't know. Might not have been chicken salad. Fatouche. Fatouche salad. So anyways, in a complete reversal where Haman wanted Mordecai dead and wanted to kill all the Jews, it was Haman who ended up on the stake that he created for Mordecai, in a big reversal. And they set another, because the king couldn't break his law once he's given his word. That is law. That's the way it used to work. Doesn't work like that so much anymore, but that's the way it used to work. And what he did was he brought another edict that the Jews could defend themselves. And so what happened was the Jews became mobilized, and what was, going to be this complete genocide turned out to be not that at all. And in fact, the Jews were elevated. At the beginning of the story, Haman is the right-hand man of the king. At the end of the story, because of Mordecai and his work, Mordecai became exalted and became the king's right-hand man, and all of the Jewish people were saved. So there's a couple of things that I want to bring out here, and for you ladies, I just want to challenge you with these 4 things that I see in the life of Esther. Number 1 is that in that time where it was so crucial, she turned to God. She turned to God. She's like, I'm going to set aside 3 days. I want you guys to do it. I'm going to set aside 3 days. I'm not going to eat. I don't know whether it said drink, but she's going to fast for 3 days. I'm going to turn to God. When all else is lost, I'm going to turn to God. More than ever before, we need to do this. As a culture, as a church culture, we need to do this. Ladies, you're dealing with stuff. You're dealing with stuff with your kids. You're dealing with stuff at work. You're dealing with stuff in your family. We're not struggling against flesh and blood. Turn to God. I'm remembering a story, and this came up, that when we were struggling with our oldest son, and it was just super painful, and it was really confusing because we really thought we had done everything we could do, and we just really didn't know which way to turn. And so we were looking for wisdom, we were looking for direction. And so I tell this story because it is Mother's Day, but there was a moment for Taylor. And when he kind of came to his senses, there were some other factors at play. But he'd been out all night, and it had just been a gong show, and Carolyn just happened to be home. And it probably was around this time, if I remember correctly, because the windows of the house were open. And to her credit, my wife was on her face before God, interceding on our son's behalf. And she had no clue where he was. Little did she know he was standing outside the window, and he could hear the prayers of the broken heart of my mom. And she was just calling down heaven on him, wherever he is. Protect him, be with him, lead him, guide him. She called on God. There was no book to help. We talked to people, it was great, they supported us, awesome. Where else do you go? Right? And so for Carolyn, she did, and we did multiple times, and we sat down and we said, God, we don't even know what to pray. We're just gonna pray a one-word prayer, help. Like, we'll just stay in your presence, and would you just help us? We've done everything we can do, humanly possible. We don't even know what to do. And that was a moment when my wife turned to God. Esther, in the same way, is like, this is where our answer comes from. And so as you're thinking out there, oh, I got to read a book, or I got to meditate, or I got to get an app, or I got to do whatever. It's like, no, all of that can happen after God directs you to get the app and read the book and have the conversation. But it's turn to God first, and that's what Esther did. You often don't realize God is all you need until God is all you have, right? Isn't that the way the saying goes? Number 1, Esther turned to God. Number 2, Esther showed incredible courage. It cannot be understated. I still don't even know how old Esther was in this time, but I can't believe she was more than like 20, early 20s. And so had no clue how the palace worked, had no clue how any of that stuff all worked, knew what the laws were, all that stuff. And literally it was like, okay, well, our entire nation is in your hands, thank you. And she's like, I didn't get the training, I didn't get the memo, I don't have the app, is there a YouTube video, is there a tutorial on this? I mean, how do I do this? And she showed incredible courage. Going before the king could result in death, and she says to Mordecai, send word, if I die, I die. I'm going to try this, but I might die trying. And I think in our day and age, ladies, and this is not a demand, I'm just saying your courage and your bravery will not go unnoticed. As you stand up and you speak for God, as you stand up and hold to your values, your courage will be seen as even more heroic, I would say, and it will do great things. Number 3 is Esther was wise. Esther was wise, and I think this is the Spirit of God that's moving on her. But like just to have the wisdom of going, hey, I'm going to meet with God, I'm going to show courage, and then, you know what, I'm going to do this thing, and I feel like I'm just going to pit, this king. It's going to be choose, who do you want to choose, him or me? And somehow she figured all that out. She used incredible wisdom. Wisdom is in short supply these days, isn't it? Because we're looking for the quick fix and the self-help and the this and that. And I feel like Esther really got to the heart of the issue here. She got to the root, and she knew she had to go to God, and I think that's where she got her wisdom, but she exercised wisdom. And then the fourth thing is that Esther, when the time was appropriate, revealed who she really was. And I think for all of us in this room, but we're talking to the ladies today, we're using the story of Esther, there's a vulnerability that we all have to get to. And it is going to take courage, and it is going to take the Lord's help. It's going to take the Spirit of God. It's going to take all the wisdom that you can muster. But the hiding wouldn't have worked for Esther. And the hiding can't work for us either. And I'm wondering if in the last decade, maybe the church has been too silent. Hey, right? Just too silent. And maybe we haven't had the courage. Maybe we're not close enough to God. Maybe it's one of these issues. But I feel like in all of these controversial things that are going on, the church is kind of like, we just want to sit here, have our little Jesus party, and pretend and hope that this storm just passes. Right? And guilty is charged, right? So I'm just saying, maybe this is a point in time where we can just mark this and just go, yeah, I need to really come clean, and I need to be vulnerable and open about who I really am. With wisdom, right? And remembering that we're wrestling not against flesh and blood. So this isn't like, okay, Monday, those people at work are getting it. I'm going to let them have it. No. Follow the track with the story. If there's a couple of points in the story of Esther, and I'm going to close with this. Esther, the funny thing about the story of Esther, it's the only book in the Bible that never mentions God. Never mentions God, not once. Right? Yahweh or Jehovah, Lord, none of that is in there. And as I did some research on commentaries and stuff, they said this was almost a poetic device, because when God seems absent, you need to remember he's not. And somebody needs to hear that today. When God sees, where are you, God? Oh, where are you? I'm doing this. This doesn't make any sense. When God is absent, he's actually not. He's at work silently behind the scenes. And God will work. God does work in the midst of all these problems. He can work in the middle of the mess, and he will. We needed somebody to call for a mama in our service. Ladies, trust God even when you can't see it. Right? We walk by faith, not by sight. And then what the thing I love about, and this is what I discovered about the story of Esther, because I didn't know this before. The story of Esther, the whole story is set up like a great reversal. At the beginning, it's a feast for Xerxes and all his people, and they're just having a great blast. At the end, they have another feast. But it's for a different story because, the Jews have been saved. And so that literally becomes a feast, a festival going forward in the Jewish culture. Haman's, the right-hand man of the king was Haman in the beginning. He is dead by the end, and Mordecai becomes the right-hand king. Things are reversed. Haman's humiliation, where Haman was supposed to be humiliated and executed, actually turned into Mordecai's exaltation and Haman's, right? Haman had to lead him around by a horse. And so there's all of these things that happened. It all hinges on Esther and the courage that she showed. And I just point that out to say that it's not all for loss. It's not all for loss. God still has a plan. God is still on the throne. We still need to serve him. We still need to do what he's asking us to do in this day and age. We still need to live for him. God's still got it under control. Right? And in fact, as has happened multiple times throughout the history of the world, when we do live for God, things are reversed. Things are turned around. They call it revival. Right? And those have come and gone before, and they will come and go again. Amen? The great reversal. So the challenge for today, ladies, is to take courage from the multiple women in the Bible who had immense courage in the face of great adversity, and that saved many. I think about Jochebed, who was the mother of Moses. Unbelievable what she poured into that guy. Unbelievable the risk and the bravery that she took to raise Moses as her own. Rahab the harlot. Can we, admonish, or can we give kudos to a harlot in church? Well, they did in the Bible. She ended up in the Hall of Faith because she had the courage to do what she did, right? For the Battle of Jericho. Hannah, the mother of Samuel. Samuel became the finest judge in the history of Israel. Mary, mother of Jesus. Woman at the well, saved her whole town. If you track with that whole story, she has this conversation with Jesus. She confronts her demons and then goes back to the entire town. In the book of Acts, when they get to Samaria, they find the whole town has been saved because of her testimony. Because she had the courage to be vulnerable. The woman with the alabaster box, we know, and she's known to this day. The Bible talks about that. She's going to be famous. She's going to be known to this day because of her sacrifice. It was the women who were there on the first Sunday when Jesus was raised from the dead. Not the guys. The guys were hiding like little cowards. Ooh, maybe they're soldiers. We're not going out there. The women are like, but there's a job to do. Da, da, da. They were the first at the tomb. A lot can happen when a woman steps up to the plate. A lot can be reversed. A lot can be changed. And ladies, you are here today, and there's so much potential in this room for your leadership. And I just want to, as your pastor, just say, go for it. Stand up for what you believe in. Speak out against wrongs. Have the courage. Lean into the Lord. Use wisdom. All those things. And what you do, what you've done has made a difference. What you do going forward can make an incredible and an eternal difference. Amen? Amen. Let me pray for you. Why don't all the men stand, and ladies, why don't you just remain seated? If you do feel to stand, I just want to pray a commissioning prayer. I just want to pray a commissioning prayer. And Father, today I thank you for